Well, I want to add my thanks first of all to all of those who have rallied today and to all of those who are taking part via the Facebook live stream, which I believe is also going out via Unity for J, as well as tweeting comments and support. As Linda has stated, this demonstration, like the demonstration we held last year, is demanding that the Australian government intervene and exercise the full weight of its diplomatic power and legal discretion to compel the government of Great Britain to immediately cease arbitrarily detaining WikiLeaks publisher and Australian citizen Julian Assange. If Julian was not threatened with arrest by British authorities and the very real danger that British courts would sanction his extradition to the United States to face a show trial on charges of espionage or conspiracy, he could leave the embassy now and return to Australia if he chose to do so. Now, this rally today and the campaign which preceded it and the support that it has won in Australia and around the world has great objective significance. It reflects two interconnected processes that are transforming the world situation and which can win the freedom of Julian Assange. Firstly, it reflects the reality that the working class, after decades in which it has been suppressed, is beginning to come forward in a massive resurgence of the international class struggle. From the Yellow Vest movement that has shaken the French state to its core, to the eruption of strikes by teachers across the United States, to the rebellion of auto parts workers in Mexico against both the company and their unions, to the ferment among workers in China, India and Brazil, to name only a few examples in the beginnings of 2019 alone, the working class is signalling that it is going to fight for a decent standard of living, for democratic rights, and for an end to the threat of climate change and world war. Secondly, the support that this rally has won from a truly impressive group of journalists, artists and academics signifies that the best elements in society are once again turning to the working class as the great social force for revolutionary change. I've had the privilege in recent weeks to speak with many people, but they include Christine Assange, Julian's mother. She cannot be here today, but she is here in political solidarity. Christine wanted me to convey her thanks to you all those who are standing up and fighting not only for the liberty of her son, but for all our democratic rights. In a tweet she sent this morning, which she asked me to read to you, she notes, "Julian has not seen sunshine or felt rain for 6 years. His eyesight is fading. His teeth are causing great pain. He is suffering from edema. His legs are swelling. His bone density is reducing severely because he has not been in the sunshine for 6 years. That is the torture that is being inflicted on a publisher and journalist." Now, we thank figures like John Pilger, the courageous fighter Terry Hicks, singer-songwriter Roger Waters, Professor Stuart Rees, journalist Joe Laurier, Elizabeth Voss and Kathy Vaughan of Unity for J, filmmaker Curtis Levy, and the many, many others who have given the most active support and endorsement to this rally. But as I'm sure all those defending Julian will agree, without the intervention of the great strength of the working class, the governments of Australia, Britain and the United States will not end his persecution. They fear WikiLeaks and all independent and critical media because it provides the working class with the truth and assists motivate its struggles. That is why there is such a concerted campaign of censorship against independent media, and why Julian has been inflicted with more than 8 years of torment. Julian Assange is a class war prisoner. His persecution is above all an attack on the working class. The Trotskyist movement, the World Socialist website and the SEP is committed to mobilising the working class in defence of not only Julian, but all democratic rights and persecuted individuals as an essential component of the struggle to achieve genuine social equality and end the danger of war. It is through that movement that Julian will be freed. That is how censorship will be defeated, and that is how the social rights of the working class will be won. Now, at this rally, we reject all of the attacks that are used by those who have abandoned the defence of Assange to justify their position. I'm not going to name those organisations and individuals. They are not worth mentioning. We know who they are, and they know who they are. We reject the totally discredited slander levelled against Julian by Swedish prosecutors in 2010 that he was under, quote, suspicion for sexual crimes. These allegations were nothing more than a frame-up, an attempt to undermine WikiLeaks and have Julian detained so that he could be rendered to the United States. Julian did not commit any crime. He has never been charged with any crime. We also reject the absurd claim that by publishing leaks in 2016 that further exposed the right-wing, warmongering character of the Democratic Party candidate Hillary Clinton, that WikiLeaks was acting on behalf of the Trump campaign or was a conduit for Russian interference. These are nothing more than threadbare lies. Those who repeat them cannot provide a shred of evidence except the so-called assessment of the US intelligence agencies who were responsible for the fabrications about weapons of mass destruction in 2002 and 2003, and numerous other state campaigns of lies and conspiracies. The whole Russia conspiracy narrative has been used to both justify the attack on Assange, wholesale censorship, and provocations against Russia that have heightened the danger of a nuclear war. While the Democrats go on and on about Trump and Russia, they collaborate with Trump to hand tax cuts to the rich, prepare a regime change war against Venezuela, and persecute immigrants and refugees. WikiLeaks published the truth. The day is going to come when Julian is freed and he will return to this country and be given a hero's welcome. And all those who refuse to defend him will be viewed and treated as the pro-imperialist stooges and enemies of democratic rights that they are. Now, we have no illusion that the Australian government is simply going to voluntarily act on Julian's behalf. Successive Labor and Liberal National Coalition governments have refused to defend Assange because of the military alliance that the Australian ruling elite maintains with US imperialism. An alliance that has seen Australia send troops to brutal neo-colonial wars from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq, and since 2010 place itself on the front line of a growing strategic competition with China that threatens to result in an all-out war in the Indo-Pacific. Now, testimony was given to the American Congress last week that makes clear that the head of the American government, Donald Trump, is nothing more than a criminal and a gangster who belongs in a prison cell. Trump personifies, though, the criminality of the entire American ruling elite. But that will not cause the Australian establishment to shift its position. As the servants of the Australian corporate oligarchs, Labor and the Coalition consider the US alliance to be more important than the rights and even the lives of Australian citizens. Let us recall that the Australian establishment collaborated with Washington to oust a democratically elected government in 1975 and in 2010 to oust an elected Prime Minister to ensure that American imperialist interests in this country were protected. We know the circumstances leading up to the removal of Kevin Rudd in 2010 because of the diplomatic cables published by WikiLeaks. Now, the only circumstances in which the Australian government will act to free Julian Assange is if the government in this country is more fearful of a mass movement of the working class demanding his freedom than they are of any disruption to their venal relations with Washington. That was underscored on February the 21st at the Estimates Committee of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. A DFAT official on behalf of the Morrison government made the following statement: "The Australian government doesn't share the view of that UN committee, that is the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. We don't believe," the Australian government said on February 21st, "that Mr Assange is being arbitrarily detained." The Australian government appears to believe that it can get away with asserting Julian Assange is sitting in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, deprived of sunlight and medical care, out of some sort of personal choice. The United Nations Working Group, that is the top legal experts of the UN, disagree. It stated clearly and firmly in the ruling it adopted on December the 4th, 2015, and which it published on February the 6th, 2016, and re-stressed last December. To quote briefly from that ruling, it read, "The working group considered that Mr Assange has been subjected to different forms of deprivation of liberty. The working group therefore requested Sweden and the United Kingdom to assess the situation of Mr Assange, to ensure his safety and physical integrity, and to facilitate the exercise of his right to freedom of movement in an expedient manner. The Australian government makes great play around the world of its purported commitment to international law, but it flagrantly ignores an international legal ruling concerning Julian Assange. Now, the Socialist Equality Party is going to make the persecution of Assange a major issue in the upcoming Australian election. Every candidate who nominates for office is going to be compelled to answer the question, do they or do they not defend Julian Assange's right to return to Australia with a guarantee of protection from any extradition request by US authorities? The most important issue, however, is the work we collectively do to bring the working class into this struggle. On the universities, campuses, the TAFE colleges and at the high schools, information must keep being circulated about Julian. In defiance of the unions, meetings must be organised at workplaces across Australia and around the world, and motions moved demanding his freedom. Such motions were moved by teachers at a high school in Melbourne and by the independent committee representing brutally exploited tea plantation workers in Sri Lanka. As the Sri Lankan workers concluded, quote, "Freeing Julian Assange is our struggle. We call for it to become the struggle of workers all over the world. Their initiative is the model for workers in every country and across Australia. Journalists and media workers have a particular role to play. In Australia, the SEP urges media workers to throw off the shackles of the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, who have refused to say a word in defence of Julian, and raise your voices in defence of a persecuted publisher. We will be going forward from this rally and the important work that we have conducted to build it with tremendous optimism and tremendous confidence. Those of us here today and listening online represent the beginnings of a mass campaign. We are sending a clear message to Julian today, and he will hear it. You are not alone, you have not been abandoned, you have not been forgotten, and you will be freed. Thank you.
Authorised by James Cogan for the Socialist Equality Party, Suite 906, 185 Elizabeth Street, Sydney, New South Wales 2000.